let's talk about just the current state of the game. We've gone through a few major and minor
Sure.
meta changes, but of course 3-3 has been a topic of conversation for a while now. What are your impressions of that era?
The era just passed?
Yeah, just like the idea that we're possibly phasing away from the GOATS meta for
Sure.
good, but when you look back on it, particularly from a broadcast perspective, what do you take away from that?
I think it really helped with an understanding of macro play in Overwatch. I think it's a pretty valid criticism from viewers to say maybe that this is a boring or repetitive style. And people would always give you a look as if you were copping out when I said to them, look, I actually quite enjoy watching this because the intricacies are very impactful, or the implications of very small things like Azaya shields the wrong target, or a Brigitte is a foot too far ahead of their team, can have really long-lasting effects through that fight, the next fight, and the rest of the map. So I enjoyed that part of the macro play, but I think one of the things as initially an FPS caster that I enjoyed were those huge swing moments, those moments of excitement, or where the individual brilliance is really displayed. And I think it's a little bit hard to perceive, I guess, a team's prowess in a macro sense sometimes, especially over a lot of games that ostensibly look the same with a 3-3 composition. So I enjoyed it because I think it really taught teams to be able to instinctively play together and kind of have an understanding, like a built-in mental flowchart of how to deal with a lot of unexpected events when you're trying to play this 3-3 style. And, what if our Lucio is the first to die? Or what if we get our Discord Orb on the enemy Reinhardt? Like, what do we do from there? How do we change? A lot of teams were able to do that, very instinctively because they had a deep understanding of how that meta worked, instead of 1 + 1 is 2, instead of rote learning, right?
Sure.
So they didn't just memorize a flowchart. They knew intrinsically, how certain pickoffs or how certain events were going to influence the fight as it went on. I'm happy to, see maybe a shift away from that now, if for nothing else than variety.
So let's talk about that then. Of course, rumors are out there that we might see a 2-2-2 lock in the next stage, or whatever might come, just to shift away from 3-3. Initial thoughts on if that is to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I preface it by saying Blizzard like to inform me very frequently that I'm not a spokesperson for them. I already know that, but tell that to everyone else. But I think, like I said, as an FPS caster, sniper play is always exciting. I think because there's a lot of weight or gravitas behind maybe one click, or one flick, or one shot. So seeing snipers work their way back in is going to be exciting. I think Overwatch has that combo of ultimate economy and ability use and positioning, and then it also has the mechanical skill aspect of the shooting. So I feel like we were a little bit more MOBA watch for quite a while, and now we're able to shift back into what's more high octane and FPS focused. So I'm looking forward to it. I think initially, and this is just my impression, there will be some balance discrepancies, because you're gonna put maybe restrictions on the game that will prevent you from maybe coming up with a composition to beat something that's really broken. Maybe Bastion or Orisa is going to be really good, and maybe just 2 DPS or just 2 tanks is not going to be enough to break that initially. So I think you can expect to see someone like Blizzard look at that and make balance passes to try and shore that up, and you can probably expect subsequent hero releases to make more sense in that infrastructure. I think a lot of people maybe underestimate how important the balance will be, and how things might actually be quite different. I think heroes like Brigitte obviously don't look great in 2 support setup because she's not super healing focused. She brings a lot more utility. So whether she stays the same and doesn't get played much, or that she is going to get tweaks, we've already seen a couple of the PTR notes and some of the patch notes. Maybe she gets changed to be better, but I don't. Maybe Blizzard are happy leaving her out. So they'll definitely have to look at the balance of the game in general, but I think it's going to be a nice change. I think the concern of creativity potentially being stifled is warranted, but it is pretty clear that the game has become a little difficult to balance or to prevent sort of that pervasive style that favors, heroes with a lot of durability or just a high rate of healing sort of being picked all the time.
Certainly asking your opinion here when I ask these questions, but this
You
also brings the...
Just my opinion, bros, or I'm not speaking for you. So good.
That's it, exactly. Asking his opinion.
I'm giving the PR guy.
Exactly, got to do it.
It's my favorite hobby.
You got to do it. I do want to ask this, though, because this then leads to a broader conversation about the idea of excitement from a broadcast and viewership perspective versus the integrity of the competition itself. So I guess more generally, how structured or how much limitation should be put on this kind of competition in order to find the right balance of both of those things?
I think you struggle to gauge that until you go in one direction or the other. I think a lot of people, I find it very strange. Some people have been very critical of Blizzard in sort of having a hands-off approach to the meta and not making these heavy-handed balance changes over the last 6 to 8 months. But it's a really pertinent question that the one you posed to me is probably one that Blizzard have had to ask themselves as well. How are we going to preserve competitive integrity when our pro players are literally trained and they are programmed to break the game? That's what they do. What pro players try to do is find a way to play the game that gives them the lowest variance and the lowest risk possible. And they will always do that. They will always find their way to that solution one way or another. They're a great tool to balance your game and to understand like where those min-maxing situations may exist. But it can be hard to give the viewers an appreciation for that same thing. And I think a way that you would want to try and fix that is to seek to, shorten the gulf between the professional players and the viewers. Mm-hmm. And that can be done obviously through broadcast or through outreach opportunities from pro players. Also by trying to bring the experience of playing Overwatch closer to the experience of playing it in an organized team and competitively, which is its own challenge in itself. That's why we see things like LFG introduced to the game, or ways of trying to give players more options for creating groups with like-minded individuals who are all trying to not throw their games. So that's always a problem. If you read Reddit or if you I hear from fans all the time, and obviously, when I match it up against what I hear from players or my own take on it after casting the game for its entire existence now, it's clear to me that there's a gulf between the pros and your average viewer, and both sides probably have to come a bit closer together. So the viewers maybe there has to be maybe a bit of understanding that this is what pros are going to do. They're going to try and break the game, and it may not be that interesting. And for our pro players, it's them sort of hanging on as the game is changed, if it is changed, to make it a bit more watchable or just easier for the uninitiated to appreciate.
So as somebody who digests this game at a much higher level and more frequency than most anyone watching it at home, what would be an ideal scenario for you in terms of a broadcast and how it would unfold and the heroes that you're seeing and the gameplay that you're seeing that would not only excite you as somebody who's casting the game, but also that you think would be really great for the viewers at home?
I think we definitely want to see variety across a match. I love that Blizzard, when they developed Overwatch, their philosophy was that all of their heroes would have relevance at certain moments. I think I want to see, game developers in general be okay with heroes being situational, though. Mm. So it is okay if maybe a certain hero is just straight up not good in a certain context. Instead of just, you can play anything whenever you want. It's a bit libertarian game design, I guess. But going forward, I think it'd be really important to see, hit scan heroes being used fairly frequently. I think it's very satisfying. There's a lot of catharsis around, seeing Widowmakers get headshots or, a McCree player that's able to play very cleanly. But then I'd want to be able to see that countered by, a composition that wants to close the gap. I think we've had so many metas that have been not stagnant, but people have stuck with it for quite some time. So the dive meta was around for quite, 3-4 months. Then we had, the goats meta was around for 6-7 months and such like that. So if we can see those events condensed into a storm and a teacup in one game where different compositions are used to counter one another, I think that's going to be really good. What I don't want to see is probably an easy way to answer it is that a composition is used to counter a composition that looks the same. Okay. I think we really want to see picking certain heroes for certain situations take precedence over trying to play the same composition just better, because then you'll be able to see the real difference in approach between between two teams who are trying to get a distinct advantage.
Let's end on this, maybe a little bit of a lighter note here. Overwatch in Australia, do you think it'll ever happen?
It will. I just don't think it will happen in the time frame that maybe people hope or expect it to. I founded a couple of League of Legends teams, when I was in Australia and really involved in the esports scene, and I've it's been a pleasure to see them sort of grow. And
I should specify Overwatch League.
Yeah, of course. But if you want to use League of Legends in Australia as an example, that has been growing, but at a slower rate. I think the Overwatch League is something that a lot of Aussies are really excited about seeing. But some people are like, next year Overwatch League team in Sydney. I'm like, who's going to play them? Who's going to fly to Sydney? Or like we're going to have a studio out there. So I'd like to think so. There are non-endemic brands like sports teams in Australia that are investing in esports initiatives. So I'd like to see them sort of partner up with Blizzard and get something going down there, but maybe not next year.
You can find videos like these on our YouTube channel and on Twitter, all social media, ESPN_esports. Mitch Uber Leslie joining us here on the ESPN Esports Desk. Thanks for your time.
Pleasure.